Welcome, friends, to Wednesday's Live again. This week, I wanted to delve into the topic, continuing with what we did last week, of assessing neutral colors as opposed to assessing colors in general. Sometimes the less vivid colors can be more difficult to assess than the obvious vivid colors, red, yellow, blue, green, orange, purple, things like that. And this is a valuable skill because in nature, probably most of the prevalent hues are very neutral hues. They're not always very obvious, even when you're dealing with greens in summer. So the chief task in assessing a neutral color is getting the value right. How dark or how light is it? Hi, Michael. I think that going forward, the ability to assess what's dark and what's light is a primary life skill in anything. So I think this is a valuable, the assessing these neutral colors is a valuable exercise, and might even be a good exercise for people who are beginning watercolor and have trouble with getting their colors to look right. Look for that value and just the big value structure, and I'm going to cover that. The thing that makes this maybe a valuable exercise in that respect is the fact that we don't really have to worry about the hue, and we don't really have to worry about the chroma, because most everything is a very low chroma. These are not vivid colors. These are very neutral colors. So I've chosen for our subject today this breakwater in Cancale in France. The tide is low, gone, it's out. The boats are sitting on the sand and the gravel there, and there's people walking against the breakwater. And primarily, it makes a good, beautiful, big silhouette. And what I'd like people to see is the overall structure being something to the effect of, I'm just going to get one big color here, and let's just make it a neutral dark. You can see sometimes, hello Carol, I don't normally clean off my palette because a lot of times the color that's just left over there on the palette, and you can see there's a lot of that here, is useful. So I'm just going to make a good big puddle of a blue and a brown, and then I'm going to squint at this. And what we want to see is something like this. One big, enormous conglomerate shape. Let's get some more of that. And if you squint, even that lighter colored breakwater wall comes across there. So this is basically the big shape that we are looking at. What do we see when we squint? That is a very, very, very necessary skill for painters, and particularly if you are painting outside, plein air. So you can see very quickly we can establish, and with just a few extra little lines here and there, something that is our big value structure. That's what we're looking for. So if you can just see, I don't have to worry about what color is this, what color is that. Yeah, the boat is it's blue, and there's a red stripe on the hull of that one. And there is this dull yellow thing over here. We have no idea what it is. It looks like something that maybe hauls nets out of the water. I can't tell. But that's what I want to look for, even before I draw it. Oh, thank you, Michael. Yeah, value, you get that right, you're 90% of the way there. And then if you get how vivid or dull the color is, you're 95% of the way there. And then if you just get the hue in the ballpark, if it's in the red range or the yellow range or the green range or whatever, and then it looks amazing. So yeah, we could finesse this a little bit. But things like this, this is just a silhouette of looking out the sidewalk or going down the street in Dubuque with some steeples and some cars. That is what the light is doing. And I want to be an artist who knows what the light is doing. Then I want to be my primary subject. So now I'm going to draw this, and I'm just going to make that. It's a pretty easy decision. We've got maybe about a quarter of there. So there's my key horizontal. I have lots of key verticals. Hey, Rick, how are you doing, man? This cuts down a little bit, nearly halfway. There's a diagonal over here, and I'm just doing this lightly. The boat comes up below that. There's the relational seeing again. What do they call it? The con. So what am I looking at? Now it's a complex mess here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 boats. I'm going to eliminate this one in the middle between the blue one and the big one. That there's just not enough boat there to tell us what it is. So I'm just finding, once I get the big positions where the horizon line is, where that series of poles, and again, use your pencil, hold it out to get and there's a little bit of wobble to it anyway. Again, about a quarter. Fence on the breakwater. There's some sort of shed here, and I am going, and it almost meets the horizon, at the horizon, which is what we call a tangent. And I'm going to make it a little bigger, and I'm going to make more of the roof show, because I want to stick a light in here. And boy, do we need more light. In dark times, you need more light. There's going to be some people here. There's that roughly triangular shaped motorized conveyor thingamajig, which apparently maybe it moves oysters out of the boat when the tide is higher and the boat is up, and they can load the bags of fish or oysters or whatever they've caught out of the boat with a little more ease. The oysters in Concal are amazing. They're just delicious. Okay, so now I'm going to start snugging this down a little bit more. I'm finding the positions of things. these boats here. I'm going to paint a big silhouette, but when we look at them, there's pretty much a rectangle, but the sides are a little bit slanted. This is a hex, or I mean, it's something that's straight and then two sides like that. So we start out, where is it? How big is it? Then what shape is it? I see a triangular shape in there. I'm going to put that in. And when things are in silhouette like this, you actually have a great deal of leeway in making up what's in there. So you don't have to worry about, oh my God, 25 windows and 16 masts, and look for the big shapes. Now this little boat down here, that rectangular cabin is leaning. And the back side of it, the stern, has an outboard motor, and it's and there's something on top. I'm sure all these boats have navigational devices. There's some sort of a fender there. So the motor would have to, the outboard motor would have to be at the same slant as the boat. So I have to be careful of that. Now, there's a lot of business coming up here. I think that's best painted if I just put it in and concern myself more with the large shapes that are up here. I'm going to suggest some people, head and shoulder silhouettes. Try to, in this area, leave them just some light spots and then turn them into figures. That's going to come to about there, the line of the bay. Okay, so that's about as much drawing as I want to do. Let me just darken it up so perhaps it'll be a little more apparent. Let's put some figures over here. There are some pylon type things over here, but I'm going to paint them as opposed to draw too many of them. Well, I'll draw them. What the heck. Okay, that's enough drawing. Now, we could, if we wanted to isolate certain skinny lights and things like that, use the China marking pencil for a resist, but I think I'm going to do them with white gouache so that I don't get, the reason being is if I drew them in with this white China marking pencil, then I'm locked into where they are. And then, the silhouette that I paint may change while I do it. So I want the freedom to do what I need to do with the lines, which are small marks, as opposed to having to make the big marks conform to wherever it is they're going. So that always gives me a little more freedom, I think. Same thing with drawing those. Maybe paint those where I want them later rather than draw them and be stuck with painting them there. So, where do we go with this? Hi, Carlene. First thing I want to do with assessing my values is we have the plane of the sky, we have the plane of the bay, and we have the vertical plane of the boats, the buildings, the people, anything that goes up and down, that sticks up perpendicular from the ground plane. Obviously, the vertical plane is the one that is catching or in the most in shadow. The light, which is well out of the picture, it's up here, is coming down. I think the time stamp on this is, whoa, yeah, actually, it's almost 4 in the afternoon. But it's summer, so the sun is still high here. I just saw something here. Okay, that divides that a little more to my liking. And I'm going to have a lot of nice rope and guy line action down in there. So, I want to assess that the vertical things, of course, are the darkest, but what about the sky and what about this? I'm looking at this and I'm thinking the sky is just a little bit darker than the bay there, and even if I look at it through my little things, it's so close. But I'm going to give the sky the nod as being the slightly darker thing, and because the light is well up in the sky and hitting the ground plane, I'm going to let that be the lighter of the two. So my values are very dark for the vertical things. My medium is going to be the sky and maybe some little parts in there. And the lights will be the bay here, the tied out bay. So, as usual, the medium has an affinity for either the darks or the lights, and in this case, an obvious affinity for the light. It's closer to that than it is to that or that. So the sky, right into the dirt of the palette, I'm going to insert some turquoise to make a pale, not very brilliant blue, because it was, the light was going in and out that day, and it was somewhat overcast sometimes, and then it was somewhat bright and sunny others, and this was one of the overcast times. So not too brilliant. So let's get a little bit of dirt in there. Now, when we're looking at these neutral colors, we make a decision. Well, yeah, I got to get the value right, so I've scoped that out. Now, is there any color to it? Do they have an affinity for something? Well, I've already talked about this has an affinity for a bluish green, so I'm working a little turquoise in there. This maybe has an affinity for something at the other end of the spectrum that's not a blue, it's more of a tan, brown, it's a warm gray. We get some yellow ochreish grays here, some greenish grays, some grayish grays. So I'll just switch to something very light and a little more of, say, burnt sienna or something like that than something that has some blue in it. And here I go, I'm accidentally getting maybe a little too blue. So I'm coming across with a bead. I might put a little more color at one end than the other. But mainly I just want to get this down there, and I can go through. The only thing I want to miss is the roof there, that I want to catch some light, and maybe some things up here. That's blue, that far shore there, so I don't, and it's darker, so I don't have to worry about that. I can leave a few skips to indicate maybe some buildings. And this is also going to dry as a very, very light color. So it may look dark now, but it's going to look pretty light later. Now, let's just start feeding some burnt sienna into that to get a browner, or maybe a little bit of something reddish like alizarin, to make it a pinkish, brownish kind of color. And I see some of that in both the boardwalk on that and here. So I will just paint through this when I do that. Let's make it a little pinker round about here. Now I'm going to be careful to skip some lights on the boat. I don't have to worry about getting in there or there. It's maybe a little too pink, so I'll get more of the blue back into it. Windows are darker. That part of the boat is darker. There is some light on this side of it. Keep a bead. Maybe I'll start smuggling in something a little bit greenish. So I'll put a bit of yellow into it. There was some seaweedy type stuff. This looks like it's starting to dry up on me, so I'm going to keep that going. I have a bead here, that'll wait. Let's make just a basic ultramarine and burnt sienna neutral. So if you want it bluer, more blue. If you want it browner, more of the brown component. If you want it lighter, more water. So let's smuggle a little yellow ochre in there. This is a kind of a... The values are very, very similar here. These are bluish kind of colors, so I can, in the boats. So as long as I skip some lights, I'll be all right. But if I miss them, I can recover them. Let's go back to putting some brown in that and a lot of water. Audrey, hello. Happily, I don't have to worry about getting any blotches if I miss my bead around here, because let's put some more of that green in there. This is a color called Nicolazzo yellow. It's a bronzy kind of color. Okay, I'm going to let this dry. So these are all very neutral colors, but a little bluish here, brownish there, pinkish here, blue-gray there, ochre there, greenish there. Oops. Don't want you to have to listen to this. Okay, so more or less get all these light colors in. Just shifting my hue a little bit. They're all very low chroma colors, that doesn't matter. Hi, Eric. Now, I'm going to get a smaller brush, something that I can draw more with. I think I'm going to go with one of my Orientals. Smaller of the two. Now I'm going to start putting in maybe some of the medium value colors of various hues. So I'm going to start in the background there and get that headland. I don't want it to be a brilliant blue, so I'm putting a little bit of burnt sienna into the ultramarine or the cerulean. I'm doing a tester to see, yeah, I think there's lighter and darker portions to this. I think I'll go with that. I'll leave some of the lights in there. I'm going to make it a bit darker now, meaning more pigment, less water. Mickey, hello. So this is something I'm going to do, is I'm going to modulate this left to right. Make it a little darker in this vicinity. Coming down into this building here, leaving some lights in that building there. I want more light here, I want more light there. It's an artistic desire on my part. Leaving some light bits that maybe I could turn into people or something like that. Now, just to keep it from getting too much all the same, I'm going to mix in some other colors. So these blues and browns and maybe a little bit of turquoise to don't know about that. Let's about some cerulean. Oh, well, yeah, I want to. I do have a color called neutral tint, which looks like black on the palette, but I don't want to get into that just yet. I think I want to save that perhaps for there. So let's go ahead and run a vertical up. We know we're going to have some. Let's make that bluer, maybe even more reddish to get it purplish dark. I'm just squinting. I'm looking, where does it look dark? Where does it look light? And where would I like it to be dark? Where would I like it to be light? Wonderful thing about this kind of subject is we have a fair amount of leeway, since things are kind of just more or less silhouetted, to make them, for our expressive purposes, something we would like, as opposed to what might actually be there. Now, look how light this looks now. Patty, hello. I am going to go, I need to mix up a lot of stuff because I'm going to have to work this shape into these shapes and not worry about those lines too much. I do need to worry about certain portions of the boat. So first I'm going to go with it. I'm going to get into that neutral tint. And then I will, it's kind of a blackish color, and then I will tint it with ultramarine and burnt sienna. And it just gets me that much darker, that much faster. And allows me if I were to mix the dark out of the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna alone, got a nice stopping point there. The issue I would run into is that it would be very thick paint and it would not flow quite like this. Whereas if I use the neutral tint and then make it a bit bluer or a bit browner or whatever I think I'm needing, then I can make a dark but relatively fluid color, which is exactly what I want at this point. So I'm going to start getting a little bluer in this mix. As we go down, I'm going to start coming across for the big boat. I should probably get this knocked in over here first, where my stopping points are. That would be the safer thing to do. As I come forward, I might make it a little browner at this edge. While I'm at it, I'm going to suggest some of those. They look to me like metal or concrete ribs. To strengthen or reinforce the wall. And okay, now, same mix, but more blue. Or you can give them cobalt even. So, over here I might make a cleaner but also darker blue. For those portions of the boat which are in actuality white, but because they're in shade, tend to look blue. Or blue-ish. So just even throw in some turquoise and let it mingle and wiggle. Certainly in there. Yes, there are windows there, but they're darker than that. So when this dries, I'll be able to get in there. Now below that is all this. And yes, I know there are quite a few bits and bobs and some of this and some of that here and there, but we're going to resist painting all that fun stuff until we get the big shapes. The main thing is the main thing. Now this boat here, it's a good bit bluer, so I'm going to mix a dirty cerulean, maybe more than that, maybe straight cerulean. Again, the thing to me that's so important is getting the value of it right. And I'm not so worried about the hue. Now I've got kind of a wonderful little stopping point here that I can get some, you know, just some miscellaneous lighter brown and pull out from that like bits of, well, if you've been around shores, you know that when the tide goes out, there's all kinds of scummy, yummy stuff. Okay. Back of this, or the side of this boat. And normally that would be a dangerous thing. That area is wet. Hi, James. When I do this, the paint that I put in there is going to push some of the other paint out to the side, but I'm hoping that that will suggest those concrete ribs that were there. And if you feed thicker paint into damp paint, you can get a soft but reasonably distinct edge. Let's get some more of that brownish stuff. Get some brown and some of this and a little bit of water. And I'm gonna, well, back there. No, not yet. No, I'm gonna, ooh. This is a good place for some splattering down here in the foreground. Because there's just all of that We will do some things back here, but not yet. Where I want to go now is in this big area over here because it's much, much lighter than it should be in my squinting exclamation. Oh, it's an oriental brush. The hair is sheep or goat on the outside and something stiffer, which they might call weasel or wolf, and it's probably just like a sable on the core of it. It's stiff. It's good for drawing. Or doing shapes like this where sometimes you want to push in there and fill in a lot of space. Other times you want to just get up on the tip and draw a bit. I have a beautiful handmade one here that James gifted me. This is for, I would be using this right now if this were a bigger picture. So I picked the size of them appropriate to the scale of the image that I'm working on. That's something that's most artists will do that, although they may not always. There are a couple of, I would just Google, or I can, if you want, message me and I'll send you a link for where I get mine. So now I'm going to do this area here. I want some yellow ochre and burnt sienna in it. It's just these are, they're not sexy colors. What can I say? But most of the world, if you get one of these things and look through that little hole so that, so it turns what you're looking at into sort of a paint chip, you can see that they're wonderfully dull colors in our world. But they're not ugly. They're very beautiful. Just like last week, I was musing on how in the world did people ever look at Mars and say it's a red planet, because it's so little red in it that there's almost no red at all. And so more neutral darks, some of them a little leaning towards blue, some of them leaning towards brown, some of them leaning towards green. This little dark area here. While this is wet, I'm teasing in some other slightly thicker color than what I previously used, so that I get a soft, indistinct edge, but an edge nonetheless. So break there. This is going to have to be painted later, I think, when it's a little drier. There's a split in the wall. Well, not a split. I guess it's, what would you call it? Likewise, I could, if I want to make a lighter spot, I can rinse my brush, squeeze it, and mop out some paint to get a lighter spot, and create, without having to go in there and paint all these stone layers individually, which would draw too much attention visually. I can lift the paint. So let's do some of that. Let's rinse the brush, squeeze it out, and then when I see the glisten about to go off of this, I can lift some thin lines. Now the glisten has gone off up here because the water's running downhill, but it's still a little damp down there. Likewise, I could use my fingernail. And the reason that that light line is staying there is because when the glisten goes off, that means the water is below the surface, but the pigment on the top is still not dry yet. So I'm going to let that settle. And I'm going to work maybe in here and take maybe some of what we have here, put a little bit of alizarin in it so it gets pinker. And this is a little bit bluer. I'm going to put water in that so it gets lighter. And maybe a little blue too. So kind of the same colors, but lighter values, more water. Back here, there's where the bay is still a little bit wetter, or maybe even some water out there. Again, I get to put it where I want it. I don't have to get exactly where it is. Artistic freedom is a wonderful thing. Let's get a little more ugly seaweed green down there. Here too. Some on that wall. And because this is a more positive color than anything we've used up till now, it's going to kind of stay ahead. And even though it's a very dull green, it's the most vivid green in this situation. So we're going to be able to use that to pull the eye forward. And I'm going to soften that front edge with a damp brush. And I think what I'm going to do now is dry everything we've got and put in those finishing dark and light accents. So go to the mute. Okay. Now, dark accents first, and I'll be using the Oriental brush and this little rigger type brush for the very thin lines. So, dark accents. Well, there's going to have to be some down there in that boat. So I'm going to get my neutral tint and a little bit of ultramarine. And the windows. stuff on the top. Navigational, who knows it, what. I see something of a particular shape or a particular size or a particular position. Who knows what we're looking at? People that make the boats do. I'm just looking for shapes. Hello, Martha. I'm going to make the hull of this boat a little bit darker here and leave it a little bit, notice it's a little bit lighter on its right side. So I'm going to get it to this stage here. And then I'm going to rinse that brush, blot it, and use it to soften this edge so that it suggests the curvature of the boat. When that's a little drier, I'm going to put the red stripe on it. I'm going to put some green in that dark, well, I'm going to put, let's say this nickel azo yellow and neutral tint for a greenish black to suggest the windows on this craft. Yeah, maybe do some of that up here too. There's a bit of a dark there, bit of a dark there. There's some kind of bluish, blackish, who knows what, on the top of this little craft. Stuff up here too. Now, something dark there. I'm going to run some lines out to here even though there's not. The bottom of this hull is black. And then it has some white accents. Ultramarine neutral tint, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna, make it warmer. This boat, goodness me, this one's a more complex little thing as far as its shape goes. So that looked so dark before. Denise, hello. That looked so dark before, and now when we put this really strong dark on, it's contrasting enough to make that look lighter. Some strong darks underneath both these boats. In here where the shade would be deepest, I'm going to suggest those concrete ribs. There's this, whatever that rig is bright yellow, but since well, maybe I'll get a little yellow, but I'm going to mix it with yellow ochre for a very neutral kind of yellow. If I make that a bright yellow, it's going to stick out maybe a little too much. Some of that with water to lighten it. These bollards, I'm going to put some. Now there are a number of, I should probably go to this rigger now. Just my dark neutrals. Where do they, there's some, I'm not sure what they are. I believe they probably tie things to them. There's some lights. Most of them are hanging this way or that. I'm going to put them where I'd like to have them. But I'm not going to make too much of a big deal over here because I want it to be there. Let's get a little more blue in this. Where do I have dark verticals? Well, I have quite a few of them here. These things are nice because they break the horizon line and force the viewer to conclude that this is in front of all that. There's no mistaking it. Let's see, down here, back of I guess where you get into the cabin. Now at this point, I'm probably going to have to go to light accents. Although I do want to have some sort of moorings for that. Just to take my eye over here. And if it sticks out too much, I'm going to soften it. Ooh, I like that. Let's get a little bit of that green seaweed type gunk. So I'm going to get out the white, working right out of the nose of the tube with a shorter, stiffer brush that has a good point, like this nylon one, dipping right into the nozzle of the tube. Now there's some if you put it on this thick, it dries to the same reflectivity as the paper itself. And while it is not quite as white as the paper itself, it doesn't really need to be. There's some vertical masts from this craft as well as this one. So these are little things that I don't want to paint around and lose the big quality of the wash here. And I don't want to be tied down to having to paint from where they might be if I used... I don't want to have these lines dictate where I put boats. I want to have boats put where I dictate where I put lines. Does that, if that, I think that makes the idea a little clearer, I hope. So, it says, where is it going to do something nice? That's what I'm looking for now. And say boat. See if we can put some, well, I haven't really done any figures yet, but I might do that a little bit later. We'll see. I still do, plenty flies. Let's play with our red. There's the red stripe on that boat. I'm going to go pretty thick right into my red. Nanette, hello. Add on there. And then I'm going to go into this color called Lavender by Holbein. Pretty thick. And it's a good approximation of a white stripe or something white in shadow. Or in the shady portions of something. Well, you know, see, I'm looking at things I would like to make a little darker. Getting down to the pretty much the last marks. These are accents. Within those big silhouettes, we want to look for where the accents would be. So they might be dark accents on a light area, they might be light accents on a dark area. And we've just been painting both. I'm going to put some figures in here, or the suggestions of figures. I'm not a fan of delineating everything down to the last degree. I like the suggestion of things because that's in keeping, I think, with my mission of painting the light. I want to paint light and dark. I'm not interested in stuff. I'm interested in what light does to stuff. Without light, we don't see any stuff. So, I guess I'll make that tower back there a little more distinct. Put some... When we first arrived here, I got so excited when we came around the corner from town and I saw that lighthouse that was in Sargent's painting of Oyster Gatherers of Cancale. Hello, Michael. And I was so thrilled and I said, yes, that's the place. And then I found the exact spot. And it was so thrilling. It sounds, you know, dopey, but when you go these places and you can think, oh my gosh, that person whose paintings I've been admiring forever stood right here or right there, and oh my gosh. Do that. It's the kind of thing, this you could be doing for hours. You want to be very careful that you don't overdo it. I might use some cerulean to bring a figure forward. And then maybe a bit of burnt sienna for a face, just a dot or a head. But let's detape and see where we're getting. I think I could add a little more funk down here without, so it's just some of this greenish grayish. I want to anchor this end of the painting a little better. There we go. And perhaps a little bit of that there. Perhaps a little more bluishness. In the foreground area of the headland. Yeah, I think that works. Maybe a little bit more there. Smuggle some of that in back there. Some of these whites are jumping forward for me, so I'm going to tone them down with a slight glaze of this lavender. I want it to look hazy and far away. So look at your lights and make sure they're not grabbing too much attention. Okay. D-tape before I get into trouble. Sharon, hello. Happy anniversary to you. I think the reason I'm drawn to subjects like this is because I grew up on all three coasts. And the last place I lived before I came to Iowa was Annapolis. And I just miss boats and water and that kind of thing. Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Sharon. So yeah, I'm at the stage here where I would be very economical about anything that I throw in from here on out. I think I would like a, and this is, I'm not painting stuff at this point. I'm putting verticals and horizontals where I think I would like to see verticals and horizontals. There's not a railing here, but I think I will put one. There's a railing on the other side. Yeah, that's enough. So, I'll look at it before I make any other marks. But the big thing about assessing neutral colors is, one, you don't have to worry about hue so much. And two, you don't have to worry about the chroma, saturation, intensity of the color because they're all very low intensity, low chroma colors. So you only have to figure out as far as the hue, whether they're biasing towards a green or a blue or a black or a brown or something like that. And then you want to look for that gigantic silhouette straight away. I mean, of course, this is not accurate compared to that, but you want to see that sort of thing. That helps you assess those three important planes: the sky plane, the ground plane or the water plane, and the plane of the vertical things like boats, buildings, people, all of that stuff. And one of them will be dark, one of them will be medium, and one of them will be light. And the medium one is important because it will either have an affinity for the light, as in this case, or it'll have an affinity for the dark in, say, maybe a nocturne or something like that. So after that, you have a lot of freedom to kind of mix those colors sort of where you'd like them. If you'd like to take it a little redder here or a little yellower there, you can do that. But always assess things by looking at things together. That was the point we made last week, and it's doubly important with the neutral colors. So remember that thing, than. Is it darker than, lighter than? Try hard to assess next to something. Don't look at things in isolation because you will tend to see too many value variations. Your eye is 100 times better than it needs to be. So, for painting purposes. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Look for light. Look for light. That's the new life skill we all have to learn. So thank you all for tuning in. It's always a joy for me to meet with you guys on Wednesdays. So till next Wednesday, everybody stay safe, stay sane, and peace out.